Please welcome to the stage, Milind Ganjawala.
Well, thank you very much. Oh, I'm thinking maybe talking too loud now. Well, thank you for coming. Welcome back. This is the time for the center update session. I think this is probably the crowd's favorite, right? Applause for that? Yeah, great. So we have some distinguished speakers here. First, I'd like to introduce you to the Director of Biological Evaluation and Research, Dr. Peter Marks. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So, good morning, and I hope everyone is doing well. Actually, it's since last year, anyone who was here last year, the place looks a little different. Actually, they finished their renovations. You can actually use the entrances again without going into a construction zone by accident. So I'll try to take, I won't spend all 15 minutes of my 15 minutes talking about construction renovations. I want to talk to you a little bit about some of the things going on at the center. And I'll try to just give you a flavor of some of the things that have been going on in this past year. For those of you who aren't familiar with the Center for Biologics, we regulate not all biologics, a portion of biologics, those that tend to be on the more complex side, things like vaccines, blood products, cell tissue and gene therapies. And we regulate a variety of products. We're the one center that has everything from NDAs to BLAs to 510Ks because we regulate the devices that go into manufacturing blood and tissues, as well as a subset of diagnostics involved in blood screening. So I figured I'd just spend the time here talking to you about kind of three areas of focus. All of you obviously made your appointments to get your 2024-25 composition COVID-19 vaccine, shortly maybe with your flu vaccine. And I'll start there and then take you through a couple of other areas. So as you're all aware, COVID-19 continues to evolve, and we continue to have waves. We were in the bit of a wave recently, which was probably in part caused by the fact that people's immunity over the past 2 to 3 years has really waned. And last year was a really terrible year for vaccination for COVID-19. Only 17% of the American population overall got vaccinated. And if you look at the older population, we didn't do so well even there, where you would have thought we would have been bucking high percentages, but we were kind of in the mid-range of percentages. So the virus continues to evolve. It continues to become more fit, spreading from people more easily. Thankfully, it hasn't become much more virulent, but we watch it very closely because, as you can see, we went from having JN1 dominance in the spring of last year to now a mix of variants with KP 3.1.1, the dominant variant. These new variants are basically recombinants in some cases, and they continue to move on. There are some other potential variants of concerns that are even further away. The good news is the current vaccine should be a reasonable match for KP 3.1.1. And that is what's out there for the mRNA vaccines. There are 2 mRNA vaccines and 1 protein-based vaccine. The protein-based vaccine is a JN1 vaccine, but for all intents and purposes, it will provide reasonable protection against KP 3.1.1 as well. So hopefully people will go out and get vaccinated. There is currently an adequate availability of these vaccines. Influenza vaccines are out there for anyone who's interested. Why they're getting a trivalent influenza vaccine this year. It's not because someone's trying to cheat you out of the quadrivalent. It's because there is not a quadrivalent. One of the B strains that has not circulated in 5 years was just dropped from the vaccine. It may be ultimately replaced by something in the next year, so it'll be quadrivalent again, but this year it is a trivalent vaccine, 2 A's and 1 B. So that is out there. And for those who are eligible, RSV vaccine is out there. Hopefully people will take the opportunity to get vaccinated. We're trying to help people understand the safety profile of these vaccines in order to make reasonable choices. Vaccination is something at the center we take seriously. We're trying to, our campaign is to try to educate providers. CDC has a more direct-to-consumer outlook on that. Our goal is to try to help providers be able to provide people the information to make informed decisions, to hopefully get vaccinated. And we also participate in trying to combat misinformation in this area. Although trying to do that is like, never mind, we'll leave that for another day. Finally, we are very much involved in ongoing biovigilance against H5N1 with preparations in place in case an H5N1 vaccine is necessary. So far, there hasn't been sustained human-to-human transmission. Hopefully, there won't be. But we always have to be ready for this, and we're keeping tabs on it. I'll move on to the fact that one of the things that we also regulate are human tissues. People may be aware that, unfortunately, products that come from humans, when they're living, it's hard. You can't terminally sterilize things, and in some cases, and so unfortunately, occasionally, if you're unlucky, things get through. And unfortunately, recently, bone grafts have been a way for tuberculosis on 2 occasions in the past couple of years to have had MTB come through the screening process, because there was no screening process in place specifically for tuberculosis for bone grafts. What ended up happening, we had 2 episodes, one in 2021 and the more recent one, 2023. This most recent one involved 36 patients, 2 of whom died of tuberculosis. And there's some real challenges screening for tuberculosis, because it turns out that PCR is not perfectly sensitive, and the gold standard still is 4-week mycobacterial culture. We'll probably see something coming from the agency soon about changing our screening guidelines to try to address that. We're trying to also, as we do that, also update some of our tissue donation guidelines so that they are more modern. They will match up more with our blood donation guidelines. Our blood donation guidelines were updated to an individual risk assessment for certain viruses. For HIV, we used to have long-term deferrals. Then we had shorter-term deferrals. Now we have individual risk assessments. We went to individual risk assessment for the blood supply about a year ago. We're now moving the tissue guidances in that direction, so that should be coming in the not-too-distant future. And there are a variety of guidances in this area that will come out in the not-too-distant future. They're all in our guidance agenda. But the idea here is to try to harmonize what we're doing for tissues and for blood. It's a little more challenging with tissues than with blood. Blood, you have a living donor in front of you. For tissues, we have both living donors, but also deceased donors. And any of you who have family relatives know that your family relatives don't always tell you all of their habits, so when they pass away, you might not have the same knowledge of what was going on, so it makes it a little more challenging. Okay, and I'm going to use the last of my minutes to talk about rare disease gene therapy. We now have 20 or so approved gene therapies in the United States, depending on how you count them. You can make the number 21, you can make it 19, depending on how you exactly count, but roughly 20. And you can see that we've had some pretty good progress over the past year or two in terms of the pace of getting gene therapies approved. The ones in blue here are T-cell therapies, so they're genetically modified T-cells. The green are genetically modified stem cell therapies, particularly for sickle cell and beta thalassemia. I'll call those out from the past year. And then the ones in purple are directly administered gene therapies for hemophilia, among other things, and Duchenne's muscular dystrophy. So we've really seen some progress here, although not as quickly as perhaps some would like to see. We did have the approval this past year of the first genome-edited product. So it's an ex vivo, a cell-based gene therapy that was modified with CRISPR-Cas9. It inactivates a repressor of fetal hemoglobin, and so you get re-expression of fetal hemoglobin, which allows it to be used for treatment of sickle cell disease as well as for beta thalassemia major. It's had some quite impressive results and was approved. It's now starting to wind its way into patients. Pretty impressive when you reflect back that CRISPR-Cas9 was first described as, in terms of its modern genome editing uses, just a little over 12 years ago. But in gene therapy, there are still a lot of challenges that exist. There are manufacturing challenges, ones that have to do with clinical development timelines, because many of the companies that work in this space are venture capital companies that simply can't take the time of doing a trial that takes 3 to 6 years to get towards an approval because they go out of business. And they also, another problem that's really become clear is that the different global regulatory requirements around the world are making it challenging for products that only treat 20 or 30 or 40 patients in each individual country to find their way into different countries. So we're trying to deal with these issues. We may, we're going to try a lot of different things. Whether they'll all work, I can't promise you, but we are trying to help advance manufacturing of gene therapy products. Gene therapies, if I had more time, and I will later on Wednesday, we'll talk to you a bit more about how we can use and apply our platform technology provisions. We're trying to work more clearly to define the use of accelerated approval for gene therapy, looking at how we can deal with the global regulatory environment, and we're also trying to see if we can help sponsors, particularly smaller sponsors, get through the regulatory process more rapidly. The platform technologies provision is one in which the idea here is if you have a manufacturing technology that's approved and you use it for another product which uses the same, in this case for a gene therapy, it would be the same backbone, which would be the vector, and just changes out the insert, and then you use the same manufacturing process. Could you leverage the toxicology information, the manufacturing information, to be able to streamline things? There was a provision that was passed into law in 2023 that allows one to do that. And it allows us to deal with things like the platforms that we're going to see with CRISPR-Cas9. Gene therapy is currently, I think, this is a forward-looking statement, but I think it's in an evolution where we're currently using often many of those gene therapies I showed you were adeno-associated viral vector gene therapies. They are probably, over the next 10 years, we're going to see a move towards genome editing as a method of gene therapy, and it will probably be not delivered via viral vectors, but rather via lipid nanoparticles using mRNA technology. And CRISPR is a great poster child of this, which may allow that to move forward. We're also trying to do things which include making use of a feature of gene therapy, which is that when you know what you're expressing, you can often then go ahead and measure what you're expressing. And that allows one to look at levels of a gene of interest that might be reasonably likely to predict clinical outcomes at the end of the day. Now, you can't always do that, but it is one way of leveraging the science in order to get to accelerated approvals and hopefully get things over the finish line faster. We're currently working with EMA also to try to address the issue of the global regulatory divergence. And the global regulatory divergence is simply a lack of convergence. It's just that gene therapy is relatively new. Europe came up with standards. We came up with standards. The Japanese came up with standards. And what we're trying to do is get to some degree of convergence, and then potentially also see if we could even review products collaboratively, much like the Oncology Center for Excellence reviews products collaboratively with other regulators. Might save us time, might get products on the market and get them to more people. Might also help keep products on the market, because things, when they have very small markets, tend to fall out of being commercialized. And we've seen that already in the gene therapy field, particularly in Europe. And finally, we're very interested in trying to see if some of what we learned during the COVID-19 pandemic can be applied to helping gene therapies and other therapies move forward more quickly. Both the Center for Drugs and the Center for Biologics have pilots ongoing now with either 3 or 4 companies, depending whether you're the Center for Drugs, which is 3, Center for Biologics, it's 4, to try to see if having a constant communication, like we did with the vaccine manufacturers during COVID-19, could actually make a difference. We've already selected 4 programs out of an application process. They span a range of very small companies, almost family-based companies, to companies that you will recognize as reasonably sized companies. And we are giving them this kind of constant contact. What does that mean? It means that for these 4 programs, they had an initial meeting followed by the ability to just call the project manager or email them about questions as they come up rather than having formal meetings. And we're using a consultant to measure metrics to see if this actually makes a difference. Even if it takes 10 or 20% off the development time, this will be a win. And if you're a rare disease parent, it makes a big difference. So with that, we are very committed to this area and look forward to a discussion later. Thanks.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Marks. Appreciate it. Let's see. Please join me in welcoming CDER's Deputy Director of Regulatory Programs, Dr. Doug Throckmorton.
Blinking red. Good morning. Thank you very much for having me back. And like Peter, thanks to the organizers for including me. Also, thanks to the organizers for, again, choosing very upbeat music. It's a consistent trend over the years, I've noticed. I don't know, it must be a conscious choice. Maybe somebody can answer that later on. Like Dr. Marks, like Dr. Marks, we're going to find a way to advance our slides here. Oh, all right, let's use clicker. There we go. Like Dr. Marks, CDER is a very large place with an awfully lot going on, and I am not going to try to cover all of that. I hope many of you were able to listen to Dr. Cavazzoni's talk this morning. I'm going to use some of those slides, but take a slightly different twist, because I'd like to talk about 2 things today. First, remind us the challenges that we find in front of us as an ecosystem, as a drug development, manufacturing, delivery ecosystem, and then talk about some of the things that CDER is doing with a focus on the work that we're doing around information sharing and information technology, because I think that's a common theme across a lot of the efforts that CDER is making to advance the development of products, the manufacturing of products, and the delivery products to patients. So I'm going to begin with acknowledging the challenges that we have in front of us. And the first one, from a CDER perspective, is pharmaceutical quality. I've talked in other places that we are in the age of quality, that there was an age of efficacy, if you will, in the 70s. There was an age of safety in the early 2000s. But I believe we've now transitioned to a place where quality is absolutely front and center in all of the decision-making we're needing to do. Part of it is what Dr. Marks said. Our products have become more complicated. Novel technologies, not novel methods of delivery require that complexity, but makes it challenging for us to create a quality product that can be delivered to patients. We're also challenged on the drug side by the sheer size of the industry, the size of the ecosystem, if you will. 6,400 sites, not counting medical gases, which add another 1,800. Products, over 208,000 finished dosage forms. You all know this much better than I do. This size this magnitude of a challenge makes it challenging for us to meet those expectations that I talked about on the last slide. They're also challenged by the geographic dispersal of where those manufacturing plants exist. Focus on the right-hand side of this slide. It tells the most direct story. Sole domestic manufacturing accounts for a very small fraction of products, of those many thousands of products that I mentioned before. 27%, something like that, of APIs and finished dosage form products are solely manufactured in the U.S. That's acceptable. Obviously, it's important, it's necessary, but it creates a challenge for all of us when we think about manufacturing quality, manufacturing products at scale, and delivery in time. This is a long list of additional challenges to the ecosystem. I am not going to talk through it, except to say that there are many other things that are also occurring today, that next week and next month, that challenge our ecosystem, our ability to manufacture quality product and deliver it to the patients. The economic challenges that are occurring, the challenges like nitrosamines and natural disasters that we cannot commonly predict, that create additional stressors on us, come and make it more challenging for us to continue to do the things we all want to do, which is obviously deliver quality products to the patients. One of the most common outcomes of those challenges has been drug shortages, and I've been privileged to help supervise the drug shortage staff now for going on about 15 years. I started just around the first time when drug shortages really came onto the landscape, somewhere around 2010. Lots of testifying before Congress, lots of challenges and things like that. It's continued to be a challenge for us, as I know it's been a continued challenge for you all. We're standing at 111 drugs as of May, so a substantial number of drugs continue to be in shortage. You all, PDA, know better or as well as I do, many of them are sterile injectables, that they are uniquely challenged when it comes to shortages for a variety of reasons we won't get into. If you look at them, they are overwhelmingly taking long times to resolve. 5 months is a long time to be out of cisplatin. 5 months is a long time to be missing vitamin B for neonates. Those are times that have to occur, but they are things that challenge us as we look at public health, as we look at delivery of products to patients. Long list of drugs. All of these are available on our website, which we update daily. I'm sure many of you are being affected by these shortages individually or by people that you know and your family members. The bottom line is these are important drugs with important implications for patients. None of us want them to remain in shortage. Now I'm going to transition to why I think communication is a central focus, not just of this talk, but a central focus of how we address that for shortages. We could talk a long time about all of the other things that we do as a center, and many of you I know are familiar with my group. First and foremost, that group is focused around communication with you as a manufacturing sector, with public health officials and with doctors and with patients, to anticipate shortages wherever possible, to either prevent them or mitigate them. And the graphs at the bottom of this slide just show how successful we can be when we know that a shortage is threatened. So if you look at the graph on the left-hand side of the slide, between 2018 and 2023, you can look at the numbers of prevented shortages. And you can see them steadily rising. And they're rising because we've spoken with you, we've understood the nature of the challenges, the nature of the threat, and found ways to address it and prevent a shortage from occurring. You can also look at the overall number of shortages that have occurred over the year, and you can see that since 2010, 2012, which I do not want to ever see again, we have been able to maintain a steady number in terms of the numbers of shortages, even though it is not the number we would like, it is not going up. We've been able to prevent that through communication from you to us. There's another aspect of that communication that I want to focus on, though, and this is one where we have had some challenges from time to time. When you make a decision to stop manufacturing, a line goes out, something like that. Even if you believe it's not something that's going to result in a shortage, that is, that it's not required for you to contact us, please let us know. Please give us that information to give us an opportunity. We have put in place a system internally that we can very quickly assess market share. We can very quickly assess the product, whether it's medically necessary. We can very quickly assess other avenues in terms of developing additional product or product capacity. We can do that quickly and work with you to find ways around it, again, with the goal of preventing shortages. So, starting my theme of communication, it's not just when you have to you're required to communicate to us. Please communicate under all circumstances when you think there are challenges to the manufacturing. This theme of communication recurs in other parts that are going on in the center, and now I'm going to talk through several other places that I think illustrate that. My central theme is communication of every time. Information sharing and information systems of every kind are critical for our interaction with you to make sure that manufacturing quality stays high and products are available for the U.S. First, I'm going to echo a little bit of what Peter just talked about, pharmaceutical quality knowledge management systems. So this is an international collaboration among regulators, also with a goal of harmonizing submission type, of submission data, submission structure, with an intent of making it more efficient for your products to change manufacturing site, your products to change manufacturing lines or methodologies. This was formed in 2020. The idea was to support regulatory reliance between international regulators with a goal of making your changes more efficient, more transparent to us. We have 2 pilots ongoing, 1 pilot around manufacturing and quality control sites, and a pilot related to inspections for those sites. In both cases, we believe they've made really great progress. We expect an update from them fairly soon. And the idea is to build on that, to continue to look for opportunities for synergy, for sharing platforms. Internally, many of you may be aware that CEDAR has put in place a knowledge management system to make our review of your applications consistent. What this means is that the CASA platform is basically setting out a structure for our reviewers to apply when they're looking at CMC changes, when they're looking at environmental assessments, when they're looking at other aspects of quality manufacturing, to make sure that platform allows them best access to data, most transparent access to data, allows them to make their own decisions, but does it in such a structured way that makes it more efficient, more timely, more quickly to occur. A framework for structured quality assessment. We've seen tremendous progress here. Most of our OPQ review lines are currently using the CASA system. We're hoping to be able to implement it into the 2 or 3 that are remaining. This kind of routinization, I believe, has worked very well in other settings, in the Office of New Drugs, for instance, where we think it's really helped make consistent decision-making, efficient decision-making a reality. Compliance is not left out of this effort. I'm not going to go through the compliance toolbox. Again, many of you in this room are intimately familiar with these. My point, however, is compliance understands the need for that same level of communication and sharing, information data exchange. They're being called on to increase the numbers of inspections. We have Mike Rogers here. We want to work together to do that as efficiently and quickly and at high quality as possible. Doing that, we believe, means finding ways to share information as efficiently as possible to make those best possible decisions. I'm sure Mike is going to be talking about, maybe Mike is going to be talking about remote interaction evaluations, something that we continue to believe are important. It's an important aspect of building our capacity to do inspections, especially inspections internationally. We've put out guidance laying out the circumstances under which we would be able to use those systems so you can understand when we can, the questions we're going to be asking, the mechanisms that we're going to be using. Again, the form of communication there is different, but the goal is the same thing. Building a system for exchanging information to make decision-making more transparent, more efficient. And then my last comment is about drug supply chain. Many of you are aware that the Drug Supply Chain Security Act is in the process of being implemented. Again, with the idea of understanding from beginning to end the drug supply chain as well as we possibly can as an ecosystem, so that we can all make the best decisions about those products if and when we need to, especially in post-marketing. So, I won't walk through all of the bullets that make up this system, except to say we understand this system is large. We understand this system impacts a lot of different systems in your world, and that we are in a stabilization period, a period before we can fully implement, when we're trying to understand the challenges that you're facing. I know my boss and I both get letters from you. We understand that that this stabilization period is still ongoing, that we still need to work through the challenges as far as the sharing of the information in this space. We continue to believe the sharing is going to be really important in terms of understanding this part of the world very well. But we know that we need to continue to make progress. To make progress, we're focusing on, among other things, IT aspects of it, in this case, the next-gen portal necessary to support your submission of data, of information to us, so that we can make those decisions. This portal is new. This next-gen portal is a focus of CDER's IT work, and we believe that by doing that, by making that available to you, by stabilizing it and then making it high efficiency, we can make it possible for you to give us the information you need in a way without unduly burdening you. I'm going to end then by just saying, first, thanks again for inviting me to come down. We all have a shared goal. We have a goal of making quality products available for the American public. 100%, I know that. Accomplishing that means meeting all of the challenges and many others that I didn't list here. I firmly believe that accomplishing that begins with information sharing, begins with information data systems that we can use across the various kinds of decisions that we need to make those right decisions efficiently and in a timely fashion, so that we can accomplish that goal that I genuinely believe we all adhere to. Thank you very much.
Everybody, a round of applause for Dr. Throckmorton. Thank you very much. Please join me in welcoming our next presenter, CVM's Director of New Drug Animal Drug Evaluation, Dr. Matthew Lucia.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for having me here today. It's a pleasure to speak with you all. As he mentioned, my name's Dr. Matt Lucia. I'm the Director of the Office of New Animal Drug Evaluation at the Center for Veterinary Medicine. Our director, Tracy Forfa, wasn't able to be here today, so she asked me to step in and talk to you about some of the work that we're doing at CVM, especially trying to address innovative technologies and in the innovative space. So today, I'm going to go through and provide an overview of some of the areas that we are, this is just a snapshot of some of the areas that we're working on at CVM. So I will talk a little bit about our approach to One Health, which really is at the intersection of human health, animal health, and environment. User fees are an essential portion of our budgetary landscape, so just take a moment to provide an update on our reauthorizations that occurred last year. I also want to take a moment to discuss our Animal and Veterinary Innovation Agenda, which is a document that we published that outlines some of our approaches, interests, and ideas about innovative technologies and innovative approaches to the regulatory space to regulate these innovative products. Also speak to an area where we are looking to work with Congress to develop some new legislative authorities in the animal food substances space. Also give an update or speak to our regulation of animal biotechnology. In speaking of in the One Health space, give an update in terms of our antimicrobial resistance strategy, some proposed labeling regulations, and then end with a discussion about some of our international harmonization activities. So CVM's role at the FDA is ensuring the safety and effectiveness of animal drugs and animal food and improving public health. So our core mission is always protecting human and animal health, and we do that by ensuring the safety, quality manufacturing, and accurate labeling of animal products, whether that's products intended to be used in companion animals like dogs, cats, horses, ferrets, guinea pigs, but also for livestock, cattle, swine, goats, sheep, and which of course have a critical role to play in the human food supply. We also realize that innovative animal health products can help to improve food production, which can have a direct impact on animal and human health. But those technologies can't fulfill that promise if they're not able to get to market, or if consumers aren't able to actually have confidence that these new products, these innovative products, actually are safe and will actually achieve the intended effect. So a critical part of our mission is ensuring that our regulatory processes are flexible, but also adapt and maintain and stay flexible, in order to be able to address these innovative technologies and medical products. So we also have our mission also includes monitoring animal products throughout the product life cycle. And so we have an active research component that uses applied science to address these challenges and opportunities across both the human and animal health fields. So the products that we regulate at CVM range from animal drugs and devices, animal cellular therapies, animal biotechnological products like gene editing and animal food. Specifically, what we do or what we try to ensure is that the products are safe, both for the animal that the product's being administered to, so also safe for in the food products that people might be consuming, like for example, meat, milk, eggs, and also that it's safe for anybody who might come in contact with those animals. We also ensure that the products are effective and that they are manufactured with sufficient quality. Currently, our regulatory work is approximately 20% food safety and 80% medical product safety. And we are coordinating our activities in the food space with the Humans Food Program. And tomorrow, my colleague, Dr. Cindy Bernsteel, is going to be coming and speaking to you all about the ways that CVM is implementing the human foods reorganization within our organization. So this slide is just intended to give a snapshot of the breadth of the impact of the products that we regulate at CVM. So, approximately $600 billion in output and 1.5 million jobs associated with the products that we regulate. Approximately 70% of households have a companion animal pet, and that's nearly close to 400 million domestic animals. The food animals range on the millions for most species and the billions in chickens, and this doesn't include aquaculture, which is actually the largest growing sector in animal agriculture globally. So switching gears now and just giving a quick update on our user fee reauthorizations. So we have two at CVM. We have the Animal Drug User Fee Act and the Animal Generic Animal Drug User Fee Act. both of which were passed by Congress and signed by the President into law last September 30th, which reauthorizes us for a period from FY 2024 through 28. So this is the 5th authorization of ADUFA and the 4th authorization of AGDUFA. And the revenue over the 5 years for ADUFA is estimated to be $174 million, and for AGDUFA, $130 million. And while these funds are primarily spent in CVM for review of medical product devices, both on the originator and generic side, we do support work that includes our ORA components as well. So a couple of key enhancements that were included in this last round of authorizations. On the ADUFA side, we negotiated holding an annual educational conference. So we'll do one a year for each year of the 5-year period. And this is intended to present to and open to the public with an agenda that is created in conjunction with our regulated industry and is intended to speak to topics that are important when it comes to the regulation of new animal products. The first conference was actually held this last July, and we had about 600 stakeholders attend from 15 different countries, both in person and online. We also negotiated conducting a third-party assessment. So the intent here is to have a neutral party assess the history of the ADUFA program, specifically looking at program enhancements that have been added over those 5 authorizations to discuss and evaluate the success of those enhancements and provide any kind of recommendations to the programs that we might be able to implement now or take forward for future negotiations. On the AGDUFA side, we focused on enhancing transparency by creating a meeting process for sponsors that would like to get feedback on their bioequivalence studies. And also, we are looking to, just like we had already on the originator side, looking to leverage the mutual recognition agreements with the European Union and United Kingdom to basically reduce duplicative pre-approval inspections for generic animal drugs. So CVM plays a big role in the topic of One Health, which builds collaborations, coordination, and communication and capacity between the human, animal, and environmental sectors to try to achieve the best public health outcomes or public outcomes. So the response to or working on the highly pathogenic avian influenza is an example of a real life, like in the moment example of our One Health interactions and activities. We also have some other challenges that are in the One Health space that, for example, would be addressing PFAS, antimicrobial resistance, zoonotic diseases. So for those that don't know, zoonotic diseases are diseases that are transmissible from animals to humans, the changing global markets, and climate change. So you can see that a lot of the issues that we deal with at CVM are far-reaching and overlapping with public health. So wanted to take a little bit of time to talk to you all about a document that we published last September, which is called the Animal and Veterinary Innovation Agenda. We abbreviate that as the AVIA. And so the AVIA outlines both activities that we're currently doing to try to address, from a regulatory space, to try to address innovative technologies, innovative approaches, innovative product developments, and also outline some areas that we believe would be for future activities for us to work on in conjunction with our public stakeholders to try to be on the forefront and adapt to the regulatory needs to address these innovative products. The intent is that this is not a static document, it's a living document. The plan is to update it both when we're able to complete an activity, but also if there's new needs and new challenges that need to be addressed. So there's 4 main objectives to the AVIA. The first is to support technologies and products that address high priority needs. The second is to align regulatory pathways to the modern landscape. Third is to enhance our One Health workforce for the future of innovation. And the fourth is to identify and address gaps specific to new technologies and emerging threats. And like I said, the document goes into more detail about ways that we believe we're currently doing this, but also some ideas for future activities. We're also looking to partner with the Reagan-Udall Foundation to actually have an assessment done of the animal product health industry in order to be able to understand some of the gaps and threats to the overall product development plans or product development in the animal health space. And this does include an analysis to get a better understanding of the international supply chain durability. And so we're looking forward to the outcome of that recommendation, the assessment, because again, just like with the third-party assessment that I mentioned before, which is more internal, this will be more of an external and give us a better picture of the state of the animal drug health landscape and how we might be, both our industry and CVM might be able to adapt to address to it. So I had mentioned before that we are currently in the process of trying to work with Congress for some additional legislative authorities, and one of these is the Zootechnical Animal Feed Substances, which we abbreviate ZAF. And this came about based on broad stakeholder interest in bringing certain animal food substances with claims related to animal production, animal well-being, or food safety and environmental benefits, using them and marketing them as approved animal food additives. So this is an item that is identified and discussed in the AVIA, and like I mentioned, working with Congress under the Innovative Feed Act to try and attain those additional regulatory authorities. And the proposed legal framework would utilize, like I mentioned, the food additive process to ensure the safety and utility of the products. And these products would include substances that are added to animal food or drinking water, function solely in the gut of the animal, so not going systemic, and are intended to affect the byproducts of the digestive process, reduce the presence of pathogens in human food products made from the animal, or affect the structure or function of the animal other than by providing nutritive value, because they alter the animal's GI microbiome or the bacteria in the gut of the animal. We also were busy, we also were able to put out a couple guidance documents with the intention of clarifying our approach to genomic alterations in animals. So we recognize that intentional genomic alterations, or IGAs, in animals have the potential to advance both animal and human health. For example, the ability to genetically modify an animal to produce the components of a drug that then gets refined and created into a human drug and is approved by our counterparts in CDER and CBER. So we work closely with them in that regard. So FDA has actually been regulating genomic alterations in animals for over 2 decades. And most recently, that includes alterations made using gene editing technologies. So we have an approach that we believe is flexible, risk-based, and grounded in science. And it's evolved as the technology has evolved and matured. And that's reflected in the 2 GFIs, Guidance for Industries 187A and 187B, that we published for the public to have an updated vision or updated knowledge on how we are looking to regulate these innovative technologies. Some notable points in the updated GFIs is that we've clarified that farmers who just have animals with IGAs on their farms don't have to register or list with FDA and can engage in ordinary activities like breeding, growing, etc., without having to contact FDA. We also expanded the types of IGAs in animals for which we intend to exercise enforcement discretion, which is not a full approval, and therefore we don't expect the same volume of submission of information as we would if they were seeking approval. So, for example, in March of 2022, we announced that we'd made an enforcement discretion determination or low risk determination for the marketing of products from 2 genome-edited beef cattle and their offspring. that after determining that the IGAs did not raise any safety concern. So this particular IGA resulted in a slick coat, which helps with temperature thermoregulation in these cattle, and it was the first time we made the determination for enforcement discretion for an IGA. We also have worked with USDA to establish an MOU on policies and protocols for how we are going to work together to regulate these products. Another area that is of One Health importance to us is our space in AMR resistance, antimicrobial resistance strategy. So we're currently working under an updated 5-year plan, which spans from 2004 to 2008, with 3 main goals, which is to align our antimicrobial drug product use, to foster stewardship, and to enhance the monitoring of antimicrobial resistance and antimicrobial drug use in animals. We do have some plans that we're looking to implement within the next 2 years, which includes finalizing guidance on durations of use, stewardship of antimicrobial use in companion animals, and developing a long-term strategy for implementing a framework for collecting antimicrobial use data. We do share those updates on our website on the FDA.gov, specifically with FDA Track. Another thing to mention is that this past March, we did publish our proposed labeling regulations for animal drugs. So if this is finalized, the rule is intended for the first time to create a comprehensive set of regulations that establish the requirements for content and format of animal drug labeling. And this would apply to both prescription and over-the-counter drugs, as well as new animal drugs for use in animal feeds. Therefore, then put the drug in the feed that then gets fed to the animal. The regulations are proposing an update to the existing labeling over 6 years, and the goal is to create a more predictable label that both industry knows for the purposes of creating a labeling, as well as that our consumers can more easily find the information on the labeling. The comment period for these regulations closed this in August 9th, and we're currently working on the comments. And lastly, I'm going to just speak to some of our activities in the international harmonization space. So we've been working very diligently with a lot of our international partners because, of course, animal health and public health actually are global health issues. So a big part of what we try to do with our partners is to standardize some of the global requirements when it comes to animal drug development. So Dr. Bernsteel is going to be talking to you more tomorrow about our activities in the Mutual Recognition Agreement, but I did want to just mention how MRAs are helping us when it comes to evaluating the manufacturing of the new animal drug approvals. So these collaborations really do help us and be able to leverage information and work done in those MRA recognized communities to help us quickly evaluate manufacturing of these animal drugs to hopefully prevent poor quality drugs from entering the US market. I did want to just quickly highlight 3 GFIs that relate to animal drug manufacturing. The first is GL18, which is on impurities. The second is Draft Guideline 60, which is on GMPs for active pharmaceutical ingredients. And the third is Draft GL61, pharmaceutical development. These were all developed and harmonized through our work on VICH, which is the veterinary equivalent of ICH. And that is a trilateral, so ours is a trilateral program between the EU, Japan, and the US to harmonize the approach to, or harmonize certain approaches to the regulation of new animal drugs. We've also updated our parallel scientific advice, which is a process with the EU that allows industry to send questions to both of us at the same time and hopefully not hopefully, they will get answers at the same time early in their product development plan. And then finally, just wanted to highlight our work under the Regulatory Cooperation Council, or RCC, which is an initiative that was established in 2011 to increase regulatory transparency between the US and Canada. So under the RCC, CVM's been working with Canada's Veterinary Drug Directorate, or VDD, and to establish a simultaneous review program under which we have approved 16 applications and have 15 products that are currently under review. This slide is just intended to provide everybody some links in case you'd like to contact us or access more information. So thank you very much appreciate the being able to speak to you today.
Thank you, Dr. Lucia. Please now join me in welcoming our next presentation, ORA's Associate Commissioner of Regulatory Affairs, Mr. Michael Rogers.
Good morning. I spent the last hour wondering what my theme song was going to be. So now I know. I just want to thank PDA for the opportunity to provide a center update for the Office of Regulatory Affairs. It's a pleasure to be here and to see some familiar faces in the audience, and I look forward to catching up with you during the break. I've been in this position as the Associate Commissioner for Regulatory Affairs, or ACRA, for 8 months, and it's an honor to be leading our organization during this critical time in our history that I think dates back to 1906. This is my first time presenting to PDA, and I think some of you have seen the bio in the program, so I won't run through that 33-year history. Only add that they forgot to mention that I joined out of middle school before joining the agency. But I can tell you that when I was selected for this position, I had an all-hands meeting with the field, and I said that many of you know my career history, having started as a GS5 investigator in the field, conducting domestic and foreign inspections, and to get to a position to lead FDA's inspectorate is not something that's happened in recent times. And I also mentioned that I knew that I was the example to many, that you can get here. You can get to this position from anywhere in our organization, because I know I am that example, and it's an honor to represent our field from the perspective of having been a former investigator. So what I think I'll do today, I think I have 12 or so minutes left and we're running behind. I'll provide an update for the center and talk about some of our ongoing and top priorities, and then address your questions and comments during the panel discussion. You know, preparing for these remarks and looking at the schedule for the rest of the month, it occurred to me that this is the last time I will be able to give an update for the Office of Regulatory Affairs. That is a perfect segue into my first update, in that, as Dr. Cavazzoni mentioned, the agency is presently involved in what I would characterize as the largest reorganization in our history. It directly or indirectly impacts 8,000 people. And our implementation date is scheduled for October 1st, but a significant change for the Office of Regulatory Affairs is that we will be the Office of Inspections and Investigations. And I actually led a crowdsourcing campaign with our internal stakeholders and asked people, what 2 or 3 words best resonated with you that describe what ORA is responsible for? I can tell you that having spent 29 years in ORA and 4 in the Office of International Programs, inspections and investigations is how I described ORA. I would say Office of Regulatory Affairs, and I would have to provide additional oral context to that. But the Office of Inspections and Investigations, it stands on its own. And so we're happy about that new name change. Some of the key decisions, and these are cross-programmatic decisions, involve the fact that our compliance components for the Office of Regulatory Affairs and the associated resources will move to the centers, and that's across all programs, and we know that that's going to eliminate a lot of duplication of effort. ORA's 15 laboratories will transfer to the Human Foods Program and the Office of Chief Scientists. Parts of our Office of Partnerships and Operational Policy, and this is the group within ORA that manages our state contracts, they will transfer to the Human Foods Program, and the Office of Inspections and Investigations will include now the Office of Emergency Operations. And some of you remember when ORA had emergency operations, so we are gaining that responsibility. But as a result, OII will focus on its core operations, inspections, investigations, import operations, and emergencies, and then we'll, of course, have a managerial infrastructure to support all of that. So as a result, we will have dedicated inspectorates for human and animal drugs, human foods, animal foods, biologics, bioresearch monitoring, devices and radiological health, tobacco, and then a small group of individuals who will conduct for-cause inspections for the cosmetics program, and that's mainly in response to consumer complaints. When we become the Office of Inspections and Investigations, our FTE, or full-time equivalent ceiling, will go from about 5,200 people to about 3,600. And we've got a lot going on to get ready for that. Some of the ongoing and immediate priorities that we're currently focused on is really to identify key leadership positions for day one. So that would include our executives and our senior managers, and to fill those positions either by actors or people that we permanently select. We're also making sure that we maintain the safety protocols for our investigators who are on the front lines in the domestic and international arena. We're making sure that we have continuity of our core public health functions, and think about inspections and investigations and complaints and recalls and sample collections. We know that we need to communicate this new organizational structure to our external stakeholders, and that includes who your contacts will be. Think about the life cycle of an inspection: receiving assignment requests from the center, conducting surveillance or for-cause inspections, conducting the inspections, the EIR, establishment inspection report, and then that inspection gets classified. And that responsibility, as I mentioned, will reside within the centers. But you all need to know who are your contacts to discuss or negotiate and share some of those promised corrective actions with the agency that could potentially mitigate our inspection classification. And so we need to publicize that information and share that with our external stakeholders. One of the things that I'm focused on is investing in our most important resource to address what I see as a very high attrition rate within the agency. I know that there is a significant cost to the agency when we lose a trained investigator. And I remind people, our center director and colleagues, and my boss, the commissioner, and others in the external stakeholder community, so much cannot happen in the FDA without the work that we do every day on the front lines. That's a fact. And we need to bring attention to those frontline investigators. I know how hard that job is. So investing in our workforce, we want to broaden the use of Title 21 that has some pay band advantages. We're looking at ways to improve the travel experience. Domestic travel and foreign travel, it's difficult. We also want to take a new approach to training. We need to modernize our training, not only in-house, but leveraging public-private partnerships, working with our centers, looking at new modalities. In fact, maybe a quick plug, I'm the architect for a course the first ever of its kind, being given by North Carolina State University. And it is an introduction to public health food inspections. But the goal is to have something like that cross-programmatically. But it's giving instruction to individuals with a science background about investigations and inspections and what regulators do to assess whether or not the regulated industry is in compliance. First ever of its kind. It's happening right now. The goal is to expand that to other areas, other universities, have it have a cross-programmatic focus. And these individuals get instruction on FDA law and what it takes to assess a manufacturing operation against standards. They'll also be told about what I didn't know when I joined the agency. I did not know that I would travel all over the world, how rewarding this job can be. I didn't know what a pension plan was, or even how important healthcare is now at 50 plus years of age. And so we want to expand that to other areas, and we hope that that's going to be a pipeline for investigators to join the FDA. We also want to add to the narrative about inspections. And Doug talked about remote regulatory assessments. But I think we should start talking about regulatory coverage. And maybe we'll get a question about that during the panel discussion. I can tell you that inspections will always be part of our regulatory strategy. As a former investigator, nothing takes the place of our ability to use all 5 senses to assess whether or not a firm is in compliance. But there's more to the story than just an inspection if we're talking about regulatory coverage. Those other tools, remote regulatory assessments, collecting samples at the border, whether or not a firm has had recalls or market withdrawals, leveraging information from foreign governments, all help us understand the regulatory picture, help us direct our limited resources from a risk-based priority standpoint. That's the narrative that we need to introduce into the conversation, especially with those who make decisions about our budget. And I guess the last priority that I'll mention is the need to tell our story. What ORA, what our frontline investigators, what OII brings to the table. And let me illustrate the point this way. How many of you, raise your hand, have heard that FDA regulates 20 cents out of every dollar? Raise your hand if you've ever heard that. Has anybody ever heard that? Keep your hand up if you know how you know that. How many pennies are devices or drugs? Or what year was that study? Other than that's on our website and it's in Wikipedia, I don't know the answer to those questions either. But I do know that is what I would call an iconic fact. It's just true. And so we paid a contractor to look at our FY22 and 23 data to tease out those things that directly relate to the Office of Regulatory Affairs and the new OII. And I can tell you that in any given year, ORA's regulatory activities contributed to the removal of approximately 1 billion potentially unsafe products from the market. Our regulatory activities prevented approximately 650 million potentially violative medical products and 256 million pounds of potentially unsafe food from entering the market from international sources. Every 33 minutes of every day, ORA initiates an inspection or a regulatory activity in the domestic or international arena. We typically make more than 50 million import admissibility decisions each year. And there's only one federal public health agency that has a dedicated criminal enforcement arm, and that's ORA's Office of Criminal Investigations. That's our story. Those are our iconic facts, added to, of course, the original iconic fact. And so those are my ongoing and top priorities and updates for the center. I want to thank you for your time. I look forward to the discussion with the panel, and hopefully we can elaborate on some of the themes that were discussed today. But thank you again for this opportunity. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mike Rogers. Please join panelists if you can just join me on the podium here. Well, thank you everyone for being here, for the panelists. It's a great session so far. We have lots of questions, and don't forget, if you have any questions, put it in the app, and hopefully we'll get around to it. See, now the fun part starts, right? I get to ask you guys some questions. We've got a lot of them here. Okay, let me start with maybe Dr. Marks, okay? Given that the release testing of vaccines was established a long time ago for vaccines with different technologies, is CDER considering any changes to the policy existing for vaccines using new technology, those improved?
Yeah, so people may be aware that we do lot release on every vaccine lot, and it seems a little like it's getting a little bit out of date perhaps for the mRNA vaccines, where you have something that's much more like a traditional pharmaceutical product that, as opposed to some of our traditional vaccines, which were like soups, which might have required more lot-to-lot testing. So we are starting to look at this. Stay tuned. This was not the, we actually have, to just be perfectly frank, this is something we have been talking about scaling back for a while. There's a bit of a challenge here, which is that right now, there's a little secret I'll let you in on. The United States population is among the more vaccine hesitant in the world. It's not the best thing to say, well, we're gonna get rid of lot release testing because people don't necessarily understand this, so hopefully as we prepare people for this, we'll probably scale it back, have some open dialogue about it, but we didn't want to panic everyone in the middle of a time when it's been already challenging to get people vaccinated. This is no joke. This really isn't a joke. Having measles, we may lose our status as a country that has eliminated measles if we have sustained transmissibility here. And we came very close once before. It is really a challenge because there are people in very senior positions that are going around questioning the efficacy of vaccines. There is, those people, the people who will tell you today about how well the vaccines actually work are not located on this continent. They're located in the continent of Africa, where between Africa and Asia, about 90,000 kids die each year of complications of measles encephalitis or pneumonitis. So the reason why I just bring that fact up is it's the reason why we, as much as whoever asked that question, it's a great question, because we would love to be able to scale back. It would save us time, money, and it would help get some of these products out there more quickly. It's just that we don't want to do anything that would potentially lead to conspiracy theorists saying that the radio transmitters are going to get put back in the vaccine so we can track all Americans.
Thank you. The next question is for Dr. Throckmorton. Does CDER take different approaches for drugs and shortages if it's caused due to production issues versus drug discontinuation? And the second part of that is, does CDER work with companies for discontinued drugs?
Yeah, so thanks for that. Short answer is no and no, I think. So look, basically, we have a set of tools that we're able to use to address a shortage, whether it comes as a result of a manufacturing problem or it comes as a result of other things. First and foremost, we need to understand what the reasons are for that shortage. Without that, we're sort of flying blind, and I think that's why there is the requirement to notify us when a firm anticipates that there's a potential for a shortage. It gives us an opportunity to employ that playbook, which starts with looking at the totality of the capacity across the marketplace. So if one firm is going to be losing capacity, are there others that can step up? Are there other ways that we can encourage them to step up in order to meet the demand? It starts with an assessment of the medical necessity. By requirement, our focus is on drugs that are medically necessary. That is necessary for public health, as opposed to products that are OTCs are a thing that are commonly used as an example of non-necessary, although obviously we have some necessary products there too. With a focus on the medical necessity, with a focus on understanding the nature of why that shortage is occurring, the group is able to work with the manufacturer, work with other manufacturers, work with the international community to look for other ways to address the shortage and obviously prevent it whenever possible and mitigate if that's not possible.
Thank you. The next question will be for Dr. Lucia. What role has CVM played in the pandemic preparedness, surveillance, and response to zoonotoxic diseases, specifically COVID and emerging HSN1? Now, I certainly don't know what they are, okay?
So thank you for the question. Really appreciate it. I think the main areas that we are impacted or we interact at CVM is when there is that zoonotic potential. Like I mentioned in my presentation, that's the transferring of disease from animals to humans. Fortunately, I'm not aware, while I think that there were some, I wasn't aware of many transmissions from animals directly to human in the COVID space, but there were incidences of animals being infected by COVID, and that was a space that we were involved with in the planning, in the pandemic planning and approach to it. So for specifically like in mink populations, they were a particularly susceptible population in the animal space. So making sure that we were working with our partners at USDA, who are the regulatory agency that regulates animal vaccines. So unlike on the human side, where FDA does it in-house, on the animal side, while we do animal drugs, USDA regulates animal vaccines. So working with them and trying to coordinate any kind of response, specifically in that space where the COVID was infecting animals themselves.
Thank you. Next question will be for Mr. Rogers. What changes can facilities expect when being when being inspected following the reorg? And would those changes be similarly rolled out across commodities like medical devices and combination products? Regulatory agency conduct and compliance and reporting inspection practices, conduct inspections, 483s, and timings, and pre-announcing them?
Yeah, thanks for that question. The regulatory requirements remain the same. And as I mentioned, when the compliance component within ORA transfers to the centers, we're going to eliminate a lot of the duplication of effort. There will be that communication that exists during inspections with subject matter SMEs within the centers, and that should be a more streamlined process. I think part of the question also references a previous reorganization effort that ORA had in 2017 called Program Alignment, when we migrated from a geographically based organization to one that was programmatically aligned, and this further extends on that concept. There are some differences this time around. We've adopted a change network, and we know that we need to communicate with external stakeholders about what these changes represent, how you will interact with the agency. And as I mentioned, we need to publish who your primary contacts are going to be. I do think that we should all start to modernize kind of our understanding of regulatory coverage. And I was dealing with some internal stakeholders to FDA, and I asked us, are we doing this that way in 15 years? And of course not. But the goal is to start today to modernize that approach. And certainly industry has the primary responsibility to ensure that their products are safe and effective. But I think the future involves broadening the narrative around an inspection. I talked about the other tools, I talked about regulatory coverage. Well, let's talk about how we refer to our inspection classifications. You know that we have 3, generally. NAI, no action indicated. Voluntary action indicated when we conduct an inspection and we allow the firm to voluntarily correct those issues that were observed by the investigator or inspection team. And then we have official action indicated, where we observed significant deviations from the regulations and something else happens, a recall or a warning letter or other. And I think the future involves focusing not only on the worst, because we are certainly hyper-indexed on OAI, but NAI, it doesn't get a narrative. It doesn't get any reference. I would say that an NAI inspection, although it's a snapshot in time, it's not everything. It meant that the world-class inspectorate, highly trained individuals, an organization that conducts more inspections than any other regulator on the planet, conducted an inspection, and at that time, for what was focused on, found nothing wrong. If I were industry, I would highlight that for others to see as well as my competitors. And so when we're talking about what does the future look like, I think, again, it's changing the narrative, how we think about inspections, how we demonstrate regulatory coverage, and how we talk about our inspectional outcomes.
Thank you. I have another one for you, Mr. Rogers. How will OIR inspect for quality cultures in organizations?
You know, I think the regulations, again, they don't change. Our compliance programs exist, but they need to be updated. But it's an assessment. If you talk about the culture of a facility, we know, in the foods arena, it's food safety culture. I know it's probably a different buzzword in the pharmaceutical industry, but it relates to the historical milestones with respect to our regulatory outcomes for that particular facility. And it gives us an impression of what should we focus on during the inspection? How deep should we cover based on what we've seen from that firm in the past?
Thank you. Next question is for you, Dr. Lucia. How does DVM deal with drug shortages?
Yeah, so we also have a role to play in drug shortage work. We don't have some of the same reporting requirements that the human side does. So for the most part, we work with the volunteering of information from our industry. So most often the way that it works is that we will get notified either from our public, where we will get notification from them that something isn't currently available, or our drug sponsors will let us know that they're anticipating a drug shortage, either because of lack of API, or active pharmaceutical ingredient, or the ability for some kind of disruption in the manufacturing facility for the final dosage form. And then we will work with them to the best of our ability to, in many cases, prioritize the review of information to support those updates to the manufacturing facilities, whatever might need to be updated, or whatever is perhaps maybe a line that has been used is going offline and needs to come back online, and so we need to either inspect that line, or we can leverage information from like the MRA to help support our approval of those manufacturing modifications. So it really distills down to communication, both us being aware that the shortage is even happening, and then once it's happened, working with industry in order to try to address it as quickly as possible. Another area that we actually proactively keep an eye out is for weather patterns. So the impact of weather patterns sweeping through a particular area, especially if that's a sole source manufacturing facility, whether it be, for example, a a hurricane coming through the southwest of the US, or other weather patterns happening throughout the world. So keeping an eye on that, having a true understanding of where the products are manufactured, so that in some cases we can proactively reach out to the manufacturers if we know that they're manufacturing certain like sole source products in those geographic areas.
Thank you. The next question came in for Dr. Marks, but I actually think that this could go across commodities too. But we can start with you, Dr. Marks, okay? Many talks have highlighted collaborations with other health authorities. Has there been any consideration for expanding the mutual recognition agreements with EMA to include cell and gene therapy? Now, the cell and gene therapy, I understand, is more for biological, but it could really go across commodities, right?
Yeah, no, it can, and it potentially the issue with some of these issues, some of these trying to have mutual recognition, has to do with getting there, with getting to harmonization, and it's easiest perhaps in traditional small molecule drugs. It gets more challenging in the biologics realm, particularly in Europe, where in some cases for biologics, there's not even a harmonized structure within the European Union. There is obviously for gene therapies now, but for certain biologics, they're regulated differently from place to place. I think you'll see us working together. There's been a lot of desire for this, and there are conversations going on, and hopefully we'll get there over the next several years. It's been, I think, the lowest hanging fruit is probably for gene therapies, then cell therapies, and then potentially vaccines, just because of the nature of the different products.
Thank you. Next question is really for the three centers, Dr. Throckmorton, Dr. Marks. As most of the well-characterized biosimilars, such as the mAbs and the enzymes, used in humans are submitted for animal use, are there any efforts to align the CMC review for GMP inspection between centers?
So we're talking about differences between, I think someone's asking a question, is GMP for manufacturing of a human drug, a human biologic, and a veterinary biologic, or can they be the same GMP? To my knowledge, at least when I was dealing with this during the period when there was a period during the pandemic where I was quite involved, and we were actually looking at trying to leverage veterinary manufacturing capacity. Mm-hmm. There are some differences in the GMPs that made that not possible, but I'm going to have to defer to my veterinary colleagues. The standards are not exactly the same, just so you know, in the area of vaccines, I can't take responsibility for veterinary vaccines because nor can even CDM because they're regulated by the USDA.
Correct.
And one of the more bizarre things, it's like the egg phenomena. If it's in the shell, it's USDA. Yep. It's out of the shell, it's FDA. It's one of these crazy things. But I think the issue is that there are differences there, which may make a little sense, but go ahead.
Yeah, so I think there are differences. I will say that, like Dr. Marks mentioned, I can't speak to the requirements for animal vaccines because that isn't our space. But we do regulate some products, for example, that are in the biological space, like monoclonal antibodies and gene therapies. And what I would say is that we always look to leverage information that's in a file, regardless of whether it was submitted to support a human application or human review. So we will look for information in the drug master files, not just submitted specifically to veterinary master files or files to support the NADA or new animal drug approval. And then we would look at gaps. I think in some spaces there might be needed gaps due to the variety of species that we regulate. And while we are all in many cases, these are all mammals, the difference in animals and is not always there might be certain requirements that we would require, certain standards from a GMP perspective that we would ask for that the human side might not, because, for example, a ruminant is not a human. Like that's a cow or a sheep or a goat. So there's just differences in the physiology of the animals that we regulate. But like I said, we do look to leverage data as much as we possibly can so that there isn't a duplicativeness of having it being submitted to the agency.
Yeah, there's also, we just have to face it, there's a difference in what we expect for animals than we do for humans, right?
Correct.
And that's why, I mean, even it goes down to even some of the science behind this. You can do heritable genetic modifications in animals.
Correct.
Non-human, but that is not allowed in humans in the United States at this time.
Yep.
Thank you. Next question will be for Dr. Throckmorton. How does data integrity inform the design, the lifecycle management, and the execution of CASA, K-A-S-A?
You said data integrity?
That's what the question says, yeah.
Well, so I guess in general, it would be foundational. I mean, so CASA is first and foremost about bringing data in a structured way, in presenting it to the reviewers, again, in a structured way and giving them the tools to be able to efficiently look at it, review it, and make decisions. Data input starts with data integrity. So I'm thinking back on my days when I was a new drugs reviewer. The first thing we did was assess the quality of the data submission. Oh, sorry. First thing we would do is assess the data of the quality, just the quality of the data submission. So data integrity, if that's what's meant by the question, I would say would be foundational. I mean, we have processes to review the data. Those of you that are part of new drug submissions and things like that will know that at 45 days there's something called a refuse to file or a filing meeting where we make a decision whether or not a submission is able to be reviewed and filed. And I will say one of the big things that we focus on at that time is data integrity, data quality, data, sort of structure and those kinds of things. It's also why we've spent as much time as we have in International Conference on Harmonization and other places in laying out a structure for what those data should be, what format they should take, where content should go, and those kinds of things in a submission. In part, it's to make it transparent. In part, it's to make it easy for us to make an assessment of whether the data can be trusted when we go to make a regulatory decision. So, didn't say it with a microphone. I think it would be foundational.
Yeah. You have to have good data right up front. Thank you. Next question will be for Mr. Rogers. With the changes in ORA, will the inspectional outcome of NAI, VAI, OAI remain the same?
Yes, we don't plan to add any additional inspection classifications. But I do think that there'll be closer collaboration with our center counterparts in making those decisions. As I mentioned, the compliance component within ORA that is presently charged with classifying our inspections is transferring to the centers. And so we have to have that close collaboration because the individuals classifying those inspections have to be linked to the people that actually did the inspection so that we can reach an agency decision on what the final classification needs to be. But we're not planning to add to those classifications. Some, though, will remember many years ago that we had other classifications like NAI, and then there were 3 levels of VAI, VAI 1, 2, and 3, as well as OAI, and we're not going back to the future with respect to that model.
Thank you. The next, the next question is for Dr. Lucia. How does a global, I don't know what this is, okay. Honestly, PFAS,
Oh, PFAS.
yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I have no idea. That is ECHA influence CVM strategy on this topic.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure. So I don't know that I'm going to be able to address this specific question. I guess I'll just speak to PFAS in general. So the area where CVM comes into play in PFAS is when there's environmental contamination with PFAS that then affects the animal food supply, drinking water or food. I think an example would be where PFAS is a runoff and it moves down the environmental streams and then goes into drinking water, for example, like a cattle ranch. And we get involved trying to understand and be able to assess what's the impact to the animals themselves, including the ultimate fate of those animals. For example, are they acceptable? Are they safe enough to be put into the human food supply, or could they be rendered, which is when animals are put into animal feed, or would they have to be, for example, incinerated or in that way? And so that's where we come into the PFAS calculation and conversations, is when the implications really start to get into the human food supply in terms of animals that are affected by exposure to these forever chemicals.
Thank you. Next question will be for Dr. Marks. Dr. Marks, you mentioned future collaboration review of cell and gene products. CBER does not participate in the IMCRA pilot. Would CEDAR plan collaborate to have a pilot using lessons learned from CEDAR's pilot? Could you elaborate on this?
The ICMR pilot
Yes.
for collaborative review. You're going to have to explain to me, Doug, what CDER is doing on that. But right now for gene therapies, cell and gene therapies, we have our own pilot that we're trying to undertake with the EMA. This is an area it's a little bit challenging, right? Because we're trying to do a joint regulatory review with a system that does not have a harmonized way of reviewing to the way we do. It's actually, we review products much more the way that PDMA does in Japan, with reviewers that are assigned internal to the agency than the way EMA does, where they have rapporteurs that are assigned from different countries with a primary rapporteur and a secondary rapporteur, and then they make a recommendation. Those come up to essentially a committee. So we're working through the issues there to be able to work together and come to a regulatory decision around the same time. It's probably going to take a little bit of time to get there. We're using a couple of test products to roll through to see if we can get this harmonization, and we'll see. Hopefully, it's going to work. We know it can work in the oncology setting to do joint reviews because Project Orbis, that's been run out of the Oncology Center for Excellence, seems to work pretty well. But they don't work with EMA. They work with 8 to 10 other regulatory authorities globally. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Next question was for you again, Dr. Lucia.
Okay.
Okay. Are animal drugs or feeds that are taken by animals intended for human consumptions impacted by nitrosamines concerns similar to human drugs?
I'm
Okay,
not
we can
sure
keep
I know
that
the
for a
answer.
later date.
Yeah. But here's what I would say actually is this. we do have for whoever asked that question, I apologize that I'm not able to answer it for you. We do have a portal, so it's Ask CVM, all one word, at fda.hhs.gov. So please feel free to resubmit that question, and it'll get forwarded to someone in the center who can help answer that question.
Yeah, I think a lot of the issues that we have with nitrosamines and drugs, I think that's probably what's asking that question, right? How does it get into the supply? Okay. Next question was for Mr. Rogers. You spoke about the priorities of developing your investigators. How often do your branch chiefs and directors go out themselves to conduct or oversee inspections?
You know, I've not directed a cadence for our managers to go out on inspections, but I know it's important. And I can tell you, when I was a GS-15 division director, I continued to do domestic and foreign inspections because I know how important it is. I know that to evaluate those work products, it's necessary to keep up with the pace of manufacturing technology. I did an inspection in Israel, and thank goodness I had one of our national experts with me. We were inspecting a biotech-derived product, and yeah, I was in management for a while, but I'm glad I had one of our national experts. So it is important. If we're assessing those work products, we have to maintain current knowledge of manufacturing technology. It's not something that I've directed our field force in our management arena to do, but it's something that we should look at. Thanks for that comment.
Thanks. I have another question for you, Mr. Rogers. You indicated that the agency is looking for additional training support from third-party resources for new investigators. Do you expect that we will see OII representation at PDA training courses in the future?
Yeah, I do. I think, as I mentioned, we need to broaden our approach to training. Historically, training for our investigators cross-programmatically has been done mostly in-house, and we need to collaborate with our centers. I mentioned the project that we have with North Carolina State University. We envision public-private partnerships, and if PDA has sessions that would benefit our investigators, especially the ones conducting complex drug inspections on the front lines and biologics inspections, we'd be interested in taking advantage of that. Thanks.
Thanks. I'm not sure who this one would be the best, so you can tell me who would fit best on this one. Okay, what are the plans to enable platform technologies in global harmonization ways, since FDA is in leading position in terms of platform technology regulations conducted to other regulatory agencies? I guess maybe that's for you.
I'll try to start.
Does
I'll try
somebody
to
wanna
start
take
with
it?
that one. So
It's interesting.
So this issue of platform technologies is become quite topical. I think it's really been come to the forefront with gene therapies and mRNA therapies, and it's getting pushed ever further because as you look at genome editing, some of the more modern genome editors, the second, third generation genome editors, are starting to look like the products look so similar, with the exception of a few nucleotides here or there in the genome editing sequence. So we are going to have to deal with this issue of platform technologies. We're trying to take a leading role at FDA, kind of leading the pack of thinking about these. We may actually hold not just US-based, but also some more globally based represented meetings on this issue, because it's clearly an area of interest. The most important thing after this platform approach, though, is that if we're leveraging it, that leveraging does not lead to products that have unexpected results. So part of this is trying to understand the limits of where you can platformize. In other words, you want to be able to move as rapidly as you can from one product to another, while knowing that you'll still have the quality, safety, and effectiveness that you'd like to expect from it. For right now, the platform technologies provision envisions that you can leverage, if you're a given manufacturer, you can leverage off one of your own approved products. As we get more experience, it was even anticipated when that bill was passed that we might think about whether one manufacturer could leverage off another manufacturer, but that's not the case yet until we have some more experience. So we'll be looking forward to working with global regulators in this area. It is this really is leading edge, and it should be an exciting place for us to see how things can go, whether it be mRNA based gene therapies or mRNA-based vaccines or other technologies where you can imagine a platform-like approach.
Well, thank you very much. I'd like everybody, thank you very much. Thank you for the panelists for being here. We appreciate all the answers to the questions. It's really great. Okay.